On today's show, part 2 of our Houston Rockets season preview, bold predictions for this year's campaign. Where do we think this team finishes offensively, defensively? How many wins? Individual predictions for Kevin Durant, Alperen Sengun, Amen Thompson, and so much more. It's all coming up right here at Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What is up, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian and credentialed media member. I'm also the host of Locked On NBA Fridays. Be sure to follow along wherever you listen to your podcasts or on YouTube. Just search Locked On Rockets, where the best way you can help us grow our show is to listen every single day on a podcast platform of your choosing, and then like, comment, subscribe on YouTube. If you missed part 1 of our season preview series, the biggest questions going into the season, go check that out. On today's show, we're going to be getting into predictions for the season. We've got a bunch of over-under predictions to get to, as well as one bold prediction each from myself and a couple of your weekly co-hosts. It's going to be a ton of fun. As always, thanks so much for making Locked On Rockets part of your day every single day, whether it's on your way to work, on your lunch break, in the gym. Thank you so much for being one of our amazing everydayers. And joining us now for part 2 of our Houston Rockets Roundtable season preview are a pair of your weekly co-hosts, none other than NBA draft enthusiast and diehard Houston Rockets fan, Madison Moore. You can track down on Twitter at MadmanLeaks. And of course, the podfather himself, Rockets Wire editor and host of the Logger Line podcast, Ben DuBose. You can track down on Blue Sky at Ben DuBose. And guys, we already did our part 1 where we tackled some of the biggest questions heading into this Rocket season. On today's show, we're going to be making some predictions about this Rocket season, as well as some juicy, bold predictions at the end of the episode back there in segment 3. We're going to get there in a little bit, but where we're going to start things off with, and the kind of the flow of this episode, just so you know, dear listener, viewer on YouTube, is we're going to be doing kind of these over-under rankings on where we think the Rockets are ultimately going to land as far as some of the team-oriented stats, like their offensive rating, defensive rating, shooting numbers, that kind of thing, as well as some individual stats for certain players up and down the roster. So, all right, guys, you ready to get rolling here on this?
Let's do it.
Yeah, let's get it.
All right, let's start things off with something that's been a bit of a question for this team and kind of the identity of this team and where things are headed this season. Where do we think the offensive rating is going to fall for this team this year? Last season, they were ranked 12th for the 24-25 season. I've got the over-under set at 7.5. So the 7th best team you ever take in the NBA offensively. Are we going over or are we going under? Madison, I'll let you tee us off here.
Yeesh. I think that you picked a great number. I think they were.
As an aside, I felt kind of dumb trying to write 7.5 for like 7th. Like I was like, do I do 7th at 0.5? Like I didn't know how to write the over under on this properly, but I digress. All right, what you got? You think they'll be better than 7th or worse than 7th offensively?
Man, I think they're gonna come in at 7. What would that be under? I'm sorry, I'm like blanking on. So I think they'll be, let's say, over. They'll be 6 to 7 range. So I'm gonna say over.
Okay.
Is that correct? Yeah.
That is correct. That's over. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I definitely think this team is going to suffer from turnovers. But the biggest thing, I think, if they go jumbo size, they're going to dominate teams offensive rebounding wise, which will also prop up their offensive rating the same way it did last year. I think it'll just be even better. And all the guys seem to have become better shooters, better ball handlers. And as you can see, this team looks like it's going to have a pretty balanced offensive force. And then you add KD into that equation. So I'm going to take the over on that.
All right, Ben, what you got?
I'm taking over as well. And if you watch part 1 of this, I already said they were top 5. So I would be contradicting myself if I went under. I just think they were 12th last year, even with obvious flaws. And I think that speaks to, the coaches making the best of a bad situation. They picked up the pace. Well, now you upgrade Jalen Green to Kevin Durant. You have better shooting across the board. You have better off-ball movement. Well, I don't know if they have better shooting across the board, but they have better shooters. And then in spots where the shooting's a little questionable, it's either off-ball movers or Steven Adams, who, even in the absence of being a creator on offense, boosts you in so many ways with the screening and the rebounding and just the savvy Steven plays that help you offensively. The data is undeniable. So I think when you factor in what they did last year and you look at how much they've improved, how much the young players are continuing to develop, I can't see, barring major injuries, them not being, a top 7 offense.
I'm going the over on this one too, so I think we're getting the clean sweep on this one, guys. I don't know how much over they're going to be because Kevin Durant by himself is worth like a 2 or 3 spot bump in offensive rating when you start to like really get into the nitty gritty and look at like the picture of how many spots back the Rockets really were from being a top 10 team despite all their flaws, as you pointed out, Ben. And ultimately, the crazy thing about this team, this iteration of this season of this team, right, is that they're going to be better. They'll have more productive, more efficient offense, and yet, like you already alluded to, they will still be a dominant offensive rebounding team. So on the more rare occasions now where they do miss, they'll be cleaning up some of those misses, which is kind of what we saw during preseason when the Rockets ran this jumbo Monstars lineup as is. So I think we're all in agreement here. The Rockets will be at least at minimum a top 7 offense this season. I like that. Let's go to the defensive side of the basketball now. Last season, they were ranked 5th in the entire NBA. I've got their defensive rating over under set at 5.5. So do you think they'll be a top 5 defense again? Or do you think they're going to slip a little bit and be worse? Ben, I'll let you take the first stab at this one.
Yeah, I'm going under, and I alluded to this in part 1 as well. But I think in addition to the pieces they lost and Fred and Dylan and Dorian Finney-Smith not being ready to start the year, I also think part of their success offensively we saw in the preseason. I do think they're going to play at a faster pace. That was a way they overcame some of their deficiencies a year ago. It leans into the skill set of Amen Thompson, especially if he's playing more at the point. There's no Fred VanVleet, so they're going to be higher paced. There's going to be more possessions, but that also means A, more turnovers, and B, more possessions for the opponent. So I think just stylistically, it's going to be different than what at times was a slog a year ago. So I think the defense will decline some on its own merits. The pieces, at least without DFS, aren't quite what they were a year ago. And leaning into the double big also costs you a little bit because you have to go zone. It's not like you can really do that much man when you're running the double big. So I just think between the personnel changes and the tactical changes to maximize a man at point guard in the lineups they're going to have, then I think inevitably, while not a bad defense, they probably won't be top 5.
Yeah, I have to agree. I have to take the under on this, and it's mainly because of the turnovers. I think the turnovers are going to let teams get up and down on the Rockets. Like you said, more possessions, young guys learning how to ball handle and run an offense for the first time completely without Fred VanVleet. It's going to lead to some clunky plays, and that's going to lead to an increase in teams' offensive rating against the Rockets. So I definitely think we're going to regress. And also there's, like with DFS out, there's no real defensive stopper right now who, unless Jabari Smith Jr. or Tari Eason takes it upon
themselves. Did Amen Thompson die? What happened?
Amen Thompson's role on offense has grown so much that I don't think he's going to be able to give that type of effort up and down and set a tone defensively. Fair. You know what I mean? I talked about that in part 1. It's just we're going to be asking to do so much of him right now. You know what I mean? And we should all be patient with him. And it doesn't mean he's gotten worse. He just has more on his plate, and it's hard to sustain that over the course of 82 games. Guys are going to be tired, like, you know what I mean? And so it's just going to be some growing pains that, and let's be real, the defense rating was number 5. That's a high bar. Like, that's a really high bar. So I expect it to regress some.
Okay. All right. I'm going to be the one odd man out here then. I'm going to say, I'm going to take the over, but it's not by much. I'm going to say they're going to stay at 5. And here's a little bit of the reasoning why. I think the Celtics are going to regress defensively. They were a top 4 defense. They were just ahead of the Rockets. And I actually think the Clippers are probably going to regress a little bit as well. I just think that with an older roster, they're not going to be as locked in and worried about the regular seasons maybe they were this past year. Plus it was the first year with JVG in tow, and they really wanted to set the culture and kind of rebuild that defensive identity over there. I think I could see the Clippers maybe taking the foot off the gas pedal a little bit and prioritizing the health, the stability of their roster, resting guys on certain nights, that kind of thing. And that in and of itself is going to lead to them maybe not being as dominant of a defensive team throughout all 82 games. I think they will be when they need to be a very dominant defensive team, but I don't think it's going to translate to like regular season success in the numbers, if that makes sense. So
they might also be distracted by looking for trees.
Yeah, busy out there planting trees, looking for good soil, fertile roots and all that good stuff. Look, so I think the Rockets actually do still finish as the top 5 defense because the DFS thing, right? It's not like he's going to be missing months on end. We don't have a specific timetable yet, but the fact that he's a little bit behind Jae'Sean Tate, and there's an optimistic hope that Jae'Sean Tate will be ready here in the next, week or so. Like, even if DFS isn't ready to go for another month, like you miss out on him for the first month of the season. I think that he'll be in the rotation quick enough to be able to be a difference maker to help level out that defense. I'm going top 5 for the Rockets defensively. Let's get to the shooting numbers here. This is such an interesting one because last year when we ran these polls publicly, everybody got the 3-point shooting wrong. So let's go. How well do we think this team is going to shoot from 3? And we can also talk about the numbers, the actual volume from 3, but 3-point percentage over or under 36.5. So that's about league average. Last year, they shot 35.3% from 3. What are we doing? Madison, tee us off.
Ooh, that's tough. Over under 36.5. I think we're going to be a better shooting team, but without Fred VanVleet.
How much better?
I know, right? I think it's really going to come in at 36, around 36. So I have to take the under. I'm not ready to say. Yeah, I'm not ready to say because I just think guys will become improved shooters, but they'll also take more shots, like Amen, right? Well, even though his percentages may improve, he probably is going to take a lot more 3-point jump shots than he did. And then we lose Fred VanVleet, which is also a great shooter. So I think we'll break even at 36 with improvements with Jabari Smith, but also Alp will take more threes as well.
Only 7 teams shot better than 36.5% last year, for what it's worth. The top 7 teams in the NBA shot either 36.6% or better. So that's a little bit of a higher bar than I kind of thought it was. Ben, what you got?
So I'll actually go over, but I don't think it's quite the endorsement that it might initially seem, because I think our initial rundown had an over-under number of threes per game. What did you put as that, Jackson?
For the over-under for threes per game, I put at 37.5. Last year, they shot 35.8.
Yeah, I was going to go under and maybe even under last year's total simply because the structural changes to this year's team. Look, KD is a great 3-point shooter, but he's also not a super high volume 3-point shooter. He looks for the best shots. And if they're in the mid-range, then he'll take those. And now you're starting the year with the double big. You have a man at point guard instead of Fred VanVleet. And while I'm optimistic that his 3-point stroke is better than it was his first 2 years, he's not going to be shooting threes at anywhere near the volume that Fred was. So I think the Rockets will take fewer threes overall. Now, the upside is that the shots they get are going to be clean looks, and especially if it's KD, ones that are very likely to go in. So I actually think the percentage will go up a good bit relative to last year, and I'm optimistic on that. However, it's going to be a fine line to walk because even if the percentage is up, which I think it will be, the reason it's up is that they won't be as trigger happy as last year when there were a lot of, late possession chucks from Jalen Green and Fred VanVleet. I don't think you're going to have nearly as much of that this year. So the percentage will be better, but it won't be quite as striking the difference as the number would suggest, because part of it's going to be, I think the offense is going to be more balanced and they're not going to be taking as many bad threes as they did last year.
I like that argument a lot, actually, and it makes a ton of sense because they lost their 2 high volume 3-point shooters in Fred and Jalen, and that's one of the reasons that they do need guys like Reed Shepherd and Jabari Smith Jr. to really take a step forward as being those volume 3-point shooters on this team, because just somebody's got to take those shots at some point. It's not going to be Amen, and it's not going to be Sengun, and it's probably really not going to be Kevin. Like, you don't expect Kevin Durant to suddenly change his play style and start bombing 10 plus threes a game here at age 37. It's just unlikely. So that makes a ton of sense. I agree with you there. I'm gonna take the over on the percentage. I'm bullish on it. I think that with the addition of better shooters like KD, like Dorian Finney-Smith, hopefully Reed Shepherd making his impact felt in the rotation as well as one of the on paper best shooters on the roster. We'll see that manifest itself in the numbers. So I'm going over on that one as well. Coming up, we're going to get to individual player predictions for Kevin Durant, Alperen Sengun, Amen Thompson, Jabari Smith Jr. What can we expect out of that quartet this season, as well as our bold predictions, one bold prediction from each of us to round out the show. We're going to get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by Bills. Look, nobody likes paying rent, but if you must, you might as well get something for it. That's where Built comes in. Built is changing the game by turning your rent money into real rewards that you can actually use. When you pay rent through Built, you earn flexible points that can be redeemed toward hundreds of hotels and airlines, a future rent payment, your next Lyft ride, and so much more. But Built isn't just about rent. It's about rewarding you around your entire neighborhood. Built is awesome because your rent finally works for you. You're earning points every month on something you already have to pay for. So turn your rent directly into rewards and start earning points around your neighborhood by going to joinbuilt.com/lockedonnba. That's joinbuilt, joinbilt.com/lockedonnba. Make sure to use that link so that they know that we sent you. Today's episode is also brought to you by Skims. Look, when I found out Skims was making underwear for men, I'll admit I was a little intrigued. I've heard great stuff about them from friends and family, so I had to give them a try. And let me tell you, they absolutely live up to the hype. Having issues with underwear sucks. You don't want to have to worry about like if you got holes in your boxers or anything like that. Whether it's fit, comfort, or just finding the right style for yourself, Skims changed all of that. Their men's line offers something for everyone from boxer briefs to classic briefs, all designed with the perfect balance of comfort and style. I tried the Skims Stretch 5-inch boxer briefs, and honestly, they're the most comfortable pair of boxers I've ever worn in my life. I made the full switch. That's all I wear these days. So check them out. Shop Skims Men's at skims.com. Let them know that we sent you by. After you place your order, select podcast in the survey and select this show in the drop-down menu that follows so that they know that we sent you. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. All right, we're going to get into our individual player predictions, and then a little bit later on, we'll get into the team predictions about win totals and where we think this team will ultimately land in the playoffs of the bloodthirsty Western Conference. But let's start with the blockbuster acquisition of this offseason himself, guys. Kevin Durant, I'm setting his over-under at 25.5 points per game. Are you taking the over? Or are you taking the under, Madison? What you got?
Got to take the under. Got to take the under, man. And it's not an indictment on Kevin Durant. I think it's actually just a promotion of how balanced this offense is about to be. I think the young guys are going to be effective and they're going to be good. And there's not going to be it's not really going to be necessary for Kevin to go out and score 26 a game, right? I do think he's still going to come out around 24, 25, right? I don't know if he's going to get all the way up to 26, 27, just because I just don't think I think this team is going to be balanced. I think this really is going to be Alperen Sengun's team. It's going to be his time to shine, dish, dime. And I think guys like Amen Thompson, Jabari Smith Jr. are going to have huge years and contribute a lot offensively. And I think KD's going to be our closer in this well-balanced attack. So
I didn't include it, but he did average 26.6 points per game last season. I should have mentioned that at the top, so I apologize. But all right, Ben, what you got? You were nodding your head. So you going over?
Yeah, I'm going over. I'm going to spoil my bold take for later on, but I think Kevin Durant's going to get some MVP votes this year, in part because the Rockets are so good as a team. And I think there's going to be a correction to the narrative with Kevin Durant, which has gotten overcooked in terms of, how much does he contribute to winning, and people around the league trying to assign blame for what happened with the Phoenix Suns, which is, the fault of a lot of people. And Kevin Durant is nowhere near the top of that list. It would be more convenient if he was, given his stature, but there's a lot more to what happened in Phoenix. Look, the reason I think he's averaging 26, 27 a game this year, Jalen Green averaged 21 per game last year as your leading scorer, even with all of his flaws. Like, as you said, Jackson, in the first segment, there's still a need for volume shooting. It's not like this offense is so advanced, especially with the double big, to where everybody can be super selective. There's going to be still some late clock possessions where you need KD to just go out and get you a bucket. And so if Jalen Green was your leading scorer a year ago at 21 points per game, and that was with Fred VanVleet, by the way, starting alongside him in the backcourt, then Kevin Durant, with everything he has going for him, I think he ends up, assuming health, at 26, 27 points per game. And if he is leading a really good team and he's in the MVP conversation, I think he's going to, go full throttle. He's going to see this, and rightfully so, as a chance to sort of remind people who he is. And so I'm expecting, assuming health, a big year from Kevin. I think he fits the model, and, for all of Jalen's flaws, 21 points per game, just imagine what Kevin can do.
He's going for the most valuable uncle award at this point, maybe. All right, look, I actually agree with Madison here. I'm siding with Madison on this one. And I agree with all his points that he put out about kind of the team-oriented approach, and even just that first game that we saw against the Pelicans, right, where Jabari was the leading scorer, Amen put in heavy, a ton of work. Kevin got his points. He got it on good efficiency, but he at no point did it feel like he needed to be the leading scorer for this team to have a chance to win the game. Whereas last year, the Rockets needed every single night. They needed one of Jalen or Fred to have a game where they popped off to just be even remotely in the conversation. And if they both struggled in a given game, then they were probably going to lose that game. Like we can go back and dig through the stats, but that's kind of what it felt like a lot of last season. I agree. KD's going to be the closer, and there's going to be some games where he pops off for 30 plus whatever on great efficiency, and he's going to look like KD. But there's going to be plenty of games throughout the season where you're going to have the talent of Sengun and Amen and Jabari and Tari and Reed. And those guys are going to be able to do kind of the heavy lifting through this 82 game slate. And so I'm settling in on under 25.5, not by much. I'm with Madison. It'll be like 24-ish. I think he'll still be the leading scorer of the team. All right, let's go to next guy here. Alperen Sengun, over under 7.5 assists for this season. Now, it's worth noting his assists from last season, he averaged, get this number really quick, 4.9. So potentially a very significant jump here from 4.9 to 7.5-ish. Are we taking over or under? Ben, you get first stab.
I'm taking under. I think that's too much of a jump in 1 year. I could see him going to, 6.5 or 7. I could see him setting a career high, but I think getting into the, 8-ish assists per game range, there's a very small amount of big men that are at that tier. And I think that level of jump in 1 year, not just from the standpoint of what is Alperen capable of, but changing your offense that much from how it ran last year, how the other pieces are used. The double big compresses the space a little bit, so it's not quite as free-flowing as, a Nikola Jokic type system in Denver. I think the assist will be up, but more than 7.5, I think, is expecting a little much.
Yeah, I have to go with you, Ben, man. I think he's capable, just not this year. And I think for a guy that averaged 8 assists, he's got to have some 15 assist games in there. You know what I mean? Like from 12 to make up for games where he just asked for the blowouts and stuff like that. I just think as a big man, it's going to be a bit tougher, even though the offense will be running more. And I think he'll be more in that 6.5 to 7.5 range. I think that is a excellent range. Like it is a superstar level range for Alperen Sengun. I think that is enough. He doesn't need to be higher than that. And so I think I'll go there. I'll go the under as well.
I'm taking the over. It doesn't mean 8. It could be 7.6 per game, but legitimately, I think it's if Fred was healthy, I wouldn't be doing this. I wouldn't be saying that but by necessity, I think the Rockets are going to lean so heavily into what Alperen Sengun provides as the best playmaker on the floor. And there's a wide gulf between him and the next one out there. And we already saw through a couple preseason games, a ton of action being run through Sengun. We saw last year, he commanded the second most double teams in the entire NBA behind the only other guy who is the best player on the face of the planet in Jokic, right? So to me, I think that the recipe is there. The blueprint is there for success. And now Sengun will have the right weapons around him to really capitalize on some of these opportunities. I think his scoring is going to go up, and I think the facilitating is going to go up too. So I'm taking the over on that one. Let's go to twin. Amen Thompson scoring over under 20.5 points per game. Now, it's worth noting he averaged as a starter last year 16 points per game. So do with that what you will, Madison.
Yeah, Jackson, you pick some excellent numbers, man. Like this is right where I expected.
I tried. Hey, FanDuel, put me in charge of some stuff. I got these over unders.
I honestly think forget it. Let's go over. Let's like you said, it could be 20.6. Okay, let's go over. I think Amen has really impressed me in the preseason. I'm not gonna lie. I think this guy's gonna be active. He's gonna be everywhere, and it looks like he's a better a driver and through the lane and finisher, as well as a better shooter. He just looks more poised out there, and I just think teams are not going to be able to key in on him because of Kevin Durant and Alperen Sengun's leap. And that is, and him and Jabari are going to really benefit from that. And Alperen Sengun getting these 7 assists, they're going to be a lot of them going to Amen. So I expect him to very squarely get, in the 20 range. And let's go over, man. I've been going under almost all of these. So let's go over.
All right, Ben.
Yeah, I'll go under. I'll be the foil. I think it'll go up a little, but as with Sengun, going from the 5 range to the 8 range is a big jump in 1 year, not just because of him individually, but how it changes the overall composition of the offense. I think the same is true with going from 16 a game last year to the 21 to 22 per game range, especially because the point Madison raised earlier about Amen having a limited tank in terms of you can't expect him to go 100% on offense and defense, or he's going to, even at 21, 22 years old, he's going to run out of gas over the 82 game grind. Well, I actually think with DFS out early in the year and you starting with the double big because there's no Fred, I think the Rockets may have to ask a little bit more of Amen defensively. And so I think early on, if he can save a little bit of juice on the offensive end to really be that top shelf defensive playmaker that they're going to need with the way the team is set up to start the year, and perhaps to some extent the entire year now that there's no Fred VanVleet, then I could see that tipping the offensive load a little bit more in the direction of Kevin. And so for the reasons that I picked Kevin to go over his scoring total, I'm going to go under on Amen at 21. I think it'll be up from 16 for sure, but I'd pick 18, 19 rather than 21 or 22. All
right. I'm so torn on this one. I feel like I'm gonna take the under. I think he's gonna come in at right at 20 a game. It's so hard to not just admit, he did 16, 9, and 5 in half the season last year as a starter. It's so hard not to imagine him just picking up 3 extra buckets a game, playing off of the gravity of Kevin Durant and Alperen Sengun. That's so easy to envision, but at the same time, 20 a game in just your 3rd year in the NBA.
Right.
Plus, we've talked about the defensive responsibilities that he has, and maybe he won't be as much of that focal point offensively because they need to kind of preserve him for, checking the opposing team's best player or what have you. Maybe that dynamic changes with DFS healthy. I don't know. I'm going to say under. I think it's not going to be by much. I think it'll be 20-ish a game, right around that sweet spot. But I'll take the under on that one as well. All right, let's get to our last individual player prediction here. Jabari Smith Jr., over under 37.5% from 3-point land. Last year, he shot 35.4% from 3. It's worth noting he had a stretch where he was on fire before he busted his hand, and he also shot some of the worst 3-point shooting of his career in November. So I don't know. He was all over the place last year. What do we think?
I'm going over because if you believe the team is going to be above, what number did you throw out? 36.8, I think?
36.5.
Or 36.5. Then it's hard for them to be over on that if Jabari's not above 37.5 because where else are the threes going to come from? Look, I think he's going to
Aaron Holiday, hello.
Come on. I actually think Aaron Holiday is going to play a little bit less than people think because if Reed is good, then I think that's going to,
Oh, you're spoiling my bold prediction, but no.
Oh, man. Right. No, I think they'll go a little bit
not
more.
the Aaron Holiday bold prediction.
No, but I would go under on the Aaron Holiday total of minutes and over on Josh Okogie, simply because if Reed is as good as we think he is coming off the preseason, then you're going to have enough ball handling and shooting. And so I think Ime Udoka might go with off the bench the size and physicality and the 7-foot wingspan of a Josh Okogie. But I know that's not the question here. Jabari, I just think his role is going to be so much more simplified this year. I really think a lot of the inconsistency from Jabari the last couple of years, the Rockets with the core 6, the core 7, were always trying to figure out who their stars were other than Alperen Sengun. And so there was a lot of sort of your turn, my turn, trying to figure out not only who has the hot hand, but hey, is this something that can turn into something more? As opposed to with this team playing alongside the big 3 of KD, Sengun, and Amen, I think the role is going to be a lot more simplified for Jabari. He's going to draw much easier matchups, and I think he's just going to be much more comfortable in his own skin and who he is as a player going into this year. And so because of that, certainly the confidence he plays with every night, but you combine that with a superior quality of looks, and I think he gets to upper 30s, near 40%, and becomes the marksman that everybody thought he was coming out of Auburn.
Yeah, I think he gets up over 38%. this year. I think exactly, Ben. He becomes the marksman, and I really think it's a testament to his work ethic. I think his shot prep has always been beautiful, but also he played in the playoffs and he shot like lights out. And when you reach that level and you establish confidence at that level to be a lights out shooter, it makes the regular season that much more easier. And Jabari Smith has been one of the most impressive guys. I might be a part of my bold predictions next segment, but I really think this guy's shooting is going to really take the leap that we've all been waiting for, and he's going to get a lot of open looks playing off Alperen Sengun and Kevin Durant. And so, and with Amen Thompson coming downhill with more ball handling opportunities, I expect him also to find Jabari a lot, and I think he's going to benefit from it. And I think he'll probably be the highest volume shooter on the team as well.
All right.
By the way, fun fact: Jackson mentioned that slow start that Jabari had at the beginning of the year.
Mm-hmm.
From November 15th onward, the rest of his season, you know what he shot from three? 38%. So excluding that slow start, he's already there, and he shot better than that in the playoffs. If you factor in the playoff games, it's probably 39 or 40. Yeah. So, yeah, I think a lot of what happened last year, he just had a flukishly bad 3 weeks to start the year, and then from the midway point of November onward, he was actually really good.
Good, yeah.
All right. I'll take the under. No, I'm kidding. No, over. Clean sweep, over. I think we're bought in. I think this is going to be a breakout season for Jabari. The confidence looks there. He looks a little bit more, clear, sure of himself when he's doing things on the floor. Just the way that he was pulling those threes in preseason looks like a different player. Like no doubt understanding, hey, I'm letting it fly, let it rip. I've got to be the high volume 3-point shooter that this team needs. Love that out of him. I think it'll translate to the regular season. I'm there with you guys. All right, coming up, we'll round things out. We've got one bold prediction each, as well as how many wins can we expect out of this team? What playoff seed do we think they'll fall in? How many all-stars will we get? And will there be any trades? We're going to get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by Mint Mobile. Look, if you're still overpaying for wireless, it's time to say yes to saying no. At Mint Mobile, their favorite word is no. No contracts, no monthly bills, no overages, no hidden fees, no BS. You can say yes to making the switch and getting premium wireless for just $15 a month. Mint makes it simple. All plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. You can even bring your own phone and keep your exact same number and contacts. You get the exact same quality service that you had before, but for a fraction of the price. So if you're ready to say yes to saying no, make the switch at mintmobile.com/lockedonnba. That's mintmobile.com/lockedonnba. Upfront payment of $45 required, equivalent to $15 per month. Limited time new customer offer for first 3 months only. Speeds may slow above 35 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Taxes and fees extra. See Mint Mobile for details. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. All right, guys, we just finished talking about the quartet, the big three, maybe big four, if you will, with Jabari included in there. This will be a fun one. How many All-Stars do we think this team is going to have this season? I set it at 2.5 All-Stars. So are you going with the over? Are you going with the under on that? Ben, start us off.
I got to go under. Look, I'm as high on the big three as anyone, but in an all-star format where there's basically 12 teams per 12 players per conference, to have 3 of them from one team, 25% when you're one of 15 teams, I can't see it.
Maybe this changes your calculus here, Ben. The new format.
Yeah, I know.
USA versus World. That's 16 USA slots and 8 international slots. Sengun has an international slot on lock. That's happening.
But here's the thing. I think Sengun was going to make it anyway. And so that's why I don't really see the format change shifting the odds all that much. So I think it's tough for one team to get 3 unless you're winning at like a 65 plus win level. And I just don't think the team, especially to start the year, is quite going to be that good. So I'll go with Sengun and one of Kevin or Amen. I personally think Kevin, it's not impossible for it to be Amen, but I just don't think the stars will align to where you can get 3.
Yeah, definitely going under. Definitely going under. You have to be kind of running away with the seeding to get more than 2 all-stars in an all-star game, especially we still have a lot of the greats playing at a high level. But I will say there are some injury, considerations now, with Tatum and what's that guy from Pacers? Yeah.
Halliburton.
Halliburton, sorry. Yes. Halliburton being out. But yeah, I'll just keep it short. I think we're going to be under. I think it'll be Kevin Durant and Alperen Sengun.
I think under is the right call, as greedy as I want to get with 3 All-Stars on this team. And even though it's never say never, right? If the Rockets really do find something, they start cooking and they are leading the pack in the Western Conference, maybe OKC gets a little complacent and, you know, the Fred injury doesn't derail things as much as we think. If the Rockets are like the floating at the 1 or the 2 seed and they're just decimating teams left and right, I could see a world where maybe they do. If Amen Thompson looks like the star that we expect him to become, then he might get some all-star consideration. It's a very narrative-based kind of voting process. I will still take the under, though. I think it's going to be Kevin and Sengun. I think we're 1 year removed from all-star Amen Thompson. All right, let's get to, do we think this team's going to make any trades this season? So I've got the over-under set at 0.5. So you take the under, you're saying no trades. You take the over, you think there's going to be at least 1 trade. What y'all got for us? Madison, start us off.
I would safely take the over. I think this team has a roster spot on it, and we know Rafael loves to make deals. I think they'll assess where this team is and where they could need help. And especially if we have some point guard issues, if that's becoming a real issue, or even some injuries, I think it's a safe bet that Rafael goes out to get someone.
Yeah, I think it's clearly over. I mean, if something is structurally wrong, then there's 2 market forces that could be pushing you in the direction of a deal. We talked about the Fred VanVleet injury for basically a month now, and whether you might need point guard help, and Fred's a quasi-expiring contract, depending on how you view the player option, who could potentially be part of a larger deal. And now with no extension for Tari Eason, look, he's not going to be a trade candidate if you take him into the summer, because as a restricted free agent, you can't move him without his consent. So if he's not going to be around long-term, and I still hope that he will be, but if for one reason or another it doesn't look like it's going to work out, then he's a trade candidate as well. I don't expect it, but it's certainly possible, just as the Fred VanVleet situation not being resolved internally is possible. So there's some big possibilities there. But even if the team is fine in the big picture, look, you can't tell me that Rafael Stone won't look to tinker around the edges. And a lot of these guys they signed in the offseason, it won't be that hard to offload a Aaron Holiday or Jae'Sean Tate or Jeff Green if you need a roster spot, and maybe it's to sign a buyout guy. We know they're close to the 1st April now, too close to sign anyone. Well, if you need to free up a spot, it's not that hard to just trade one of those guys into a trade exception somewhere, and voila, you have your roster spot. So it could be on the small side. If things don't go well, you might need to do something bigger, but I think over a half is a pretty safe bet.
I should have set this one at 1.5. This is like the one that I didn't feel good.
And I still would have gone over 1.5.
Last year I set it at 1.5, and I don't know why I lowered it this much this year. But even with the Tari news, especially, like if Tari had gotten locked up, I might have been bullish enough to say like under and just be like no trades. Like they're locked in, they've got everybody they want. Cool. Like even emergency wise, they'll wait for Fred VanVleet to be healthy. They'll run it back next year, whatever. I'm going over on it as well for all the reasons that you guys already alluded to. I agree completely. All right, 2 more here, and then we get to our bold predictions that we have for each one of us. Let's go with how many wins do we think this team's going to get? And I didn't include this in our rundown, but it's set right now at FanDuel. Our good friends over at FanDuel, the win totals are set at 52.5 for this Rockets team. So are we going over or under on the 52.5?
Yeah,
over.
Yeah, definitely over. I think we
clean sweep. I'm taking the over too. Yeah, just so we get that one out of the way super quick.
I think we definitely are going to be in a range of 54 to 58 in that range. I think we fall between like 55, 56 wins. And I say that not just because this team is going to be better, but when I look around at the other teams in the league, I'm not really scared of anybody. And I think this team is young and hungry, and they're going to want to win games.
Can we just highlight how disrespectful it is, some of the predictions that have the Rockets down at like 40-something wins? Like after the success that they had last year and adding Kevin Durant? Like what the hell?
Yeah, I know. It's ridiculous. And I know some of them are models, and, you know, Fred VanVleet's a guy who's graded out very well over
Analytics nerds are ruining the game I love. Get out of here. Nobody wants to look at a graph when we're talking ball.
Yeah. No, I am bullish, and we've talked about this in the past on Amen Thompson and Reed Shepherd taking leaps. But the bigger factor that I don't think enough people are accounting for, a full season of healthy Steven Adams. I don't think people around the league are accounting for that enough. It took until the last 6 weeks of last year before he was even close to himself. And so I think a lot of the stats-based models, you know, the narrative factors in what Steven did in the playoffs. He was incredible. But when you factor in last year's 52-30 team, for the most part, they had a pedestrian Steven Adams in his first year off of knee surgery. now that he's 2 years removed. I don't know if you guys have watched the practice clips from the Rockets, but I've been blown away looking at how springy he is compared to, it's night and day from this time a year ago. And so Steven Adams is a really impactful player. All the advanced metrics show it. And the Rockets had him in the playoffs, but all the data that these models are comparing last year's 52 and 30 team to, that data does not include the version of Steven Adams that the Rockets have now or the version they had in the playoffs. So I think Steven Adams is the X factor for why I think a lot of the stats-based models aren't giving this team the credit that it's worth.
All right, I'm glad we're in agreement there. The 52.5, that was an easy over when I saw them come out with that. Hell, they could have won 55 this last season. They punted on the last 3 games of the year. So, all right, one more here. This one isn't going to be an over-under because it wouldn't be as fun to do it that way. But where do we think this team lands in the playoffs? Playoff seeding. What spot do they ultimately claim?
I've got them as the 2 seed again.
Yeah, me too. I definitely think I'll be the 2 seed. I mean, OKC is the only other team that I think is squarely going to be better than them. And I think they'll easily roll 60 wins, OKC. But then after that, I'm not afraid of anybody. I think the Rockets have a chance to win every game, including OKC games.
And I won't go on my sermon again that I did in part 1, but I think people
because you're going to do it again in a second.
People are looking at Denver with rose-colored glasses and not accounting for the transition. Too many people are down on Michael Porter Jr. because of the contract, because of the version they saw in the playoffs, and not considering the totality of who he is as a basketball player.
Mizzou, boo, boo. All right. I'm so torn on this. I really want to say the 2 seed, but I am worried about not having Fred, not having that stabilizing force, and also it's so dependent on how many games Kevin misses, because this team without Kevin is suddenly the same team that we saw them at times really struggle, and the floor fell out from underneath them when they didn't have Fred on the floor last season, but they also don't have Jalen Green's potentially scorching hot 25 plus to bail them out. In that case, I just don't know what direction they go in if they don't have Kevin out there, and Kevin's going to miss some time this season, probably. Hopefully, knock on wood, it's nothing severe, where he misses a quarter of the season or anything crazy like that. Hopefully it's just strategic rest, that kind of thing. I'm going to say that they clock in as the 3 seed. I think that there's a very realistic possibility that any team of the Nuggets or the Wolves or hell, maybe the Clippers finish a little bit ahead of them in the regular season. It wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, but I'm not as bullish on them being the 2 seed as you guys are at this point. All right. That gets us through our over-unders, except for that last one. Let's do our one bold prediction each. Madison, tee us off. What do you got for your bold prediction?
Great. Okay. So my one bold prediction is that the Rockets will have 4 players this year average over 18 points per game.
Ooh.
So I think the 4 players will be Kevin Durant, Alperen Sengun, Amen Thompson, and
Aaron Holiday. Sorry.
No.
Had to.
Aaron's gonna
the quartet, the penciled in starters, if you will, right? No, I could buy that. I like that. And honestly, a little bit more of what we saw last year, right? Sometimes you, sometimes me, always us, but just with a hyper uber efficient KD leading the charge. So
exactly. And I think the key here is, all of that's pretty believable, except Jabari Smith Jr. is the one that is really key. I think Jabari Smith Jr. is going to score at a really easy level. And if he's shooting 40% from 3, like we think he's going to shoot, and he gets his attempts up to 6 a game, I think it's very well possible that this guy can easily eclipse over 18 and maybe even get to 20. So,
all right, Ben, hit us.
Yeah, I teased it earlier, but I think this season is going to be the Kevin Durant Redemption Tour, particularly from a narrative perspective, because there's so
you missed your
things.
Opportunity to say Aaron Holiday MVP votes. How dare you? All right, keep going.
No, I think he's definitely going to get MVP votes, assuming health, and it wouldn't shock me if he's top 5. So since it's a bold pick segment, yeah, I'll say he finishes top 5 in MVP voting because, one argument against it is durability. But when you look at the last 2 years, he's averaged almost 70 games per season. And when you dig a little bit deeper, 2 years ago, he played 75 games. Last year, he played 62. Well, a big chunk of the 20 games that he missed were at the end of the year when he turned an ankle. And at that point, Phoenix was out of the playoff mix, and it was already reported that they were looking to trade him in the offseason. So why would you bring him back? So I think last year it probably would have been more than 62 if they had anything to play for down the stretch of the year and not just strategically shut him down. if Kevin is out there for 70-ish games, and by the way, he looks in phenomenal shape to me when you see him at training camp and in the preseason and in practices, all the stuff that we see behind the scenes, he takes his body really, really seriously, even at 37 years old. If he's out there, I think there's going to be a push to reward this team if the Rockets are winning at a second seed level, which Madison and I both expect they will. I've got him at 55 and 27. And if Kevin at 37 years old is going out there and putting up, as I projected earlier, 27-ish points per game on still elite efficiency, I don't see, as the leader of this team, how he doesn't get a look if this team is as good as we expect them to be. And, you know, a lot of it's, I think people are going to come around on what's happened to Kevin Durant this decade as being much more circumstantial. Because when you actually take a deeper look at, I guess, his 2020s in the NBA, look, that 21 team in Brooklyn, they were a shoe size from winning the championship. They knock out the Milwaukee Bucks if KD's shoe is a size smaller. It's that close. And then we all know what happened in Brooklyn. Kyrie and the COVID vaccine. Harden then asked for a trade in large part because of the issues surrounding Kyrie. Everything falls apart. And then the Phoenix years, KD said it in his interview with Chris Mannix, the cover story from last week. Their best lineups were Kevin and 4 guards at 6'5" or smaller. And that's a horrible formula to win in the modern NBA, where teams are getting bigger, they're getting more physical. You need to be able to switch across the board. He talked about that at Media Day. Those teams in Phoenix, for starters, they gave up a ton in the deal to get KD from Brooklyn. The older players that were part of so-called big threes, Chris Paul, Bradley Beal, those types of guys, were much more stars in name than in reality. They were a point in their careers, and with Bradley, maybe he was hurt as well, where they were nowhere near as impactful as people wanted to think. And then the rest of the roster, very one-dimensional, not much size, certainly no rim protection. And so the bottom line, those teams in Phoenix were not set up to win at a high level. And for all the talk about, you know, what all this leads to is people questioning if Kevin Durant still impacts winning. I've seen that in a number of articles this offseason. Oh, the numbers are still there, but look at the teams the last few years. Well, I think it's pretty clearly circumstances. The roster with the Phoenix Suns, the issues with Kyrie and James Harden in the final half of KD's Brooklyn tenure, I think it's just been some bad luck for Kevin. And I think with a better roster around him, you're not going to see a repeat of those issues in Phoenix where they didn't have the pieces around him. And even adjusting for that, here's the kicker. For all the talk about he doesn't impact winning, last year when KD played those 62 games, they were 33 and 29. The 20 that he sat out, 3 and 17. So that's a pretty big impact on winning. It's just the baseline is so low when you're talking about a 500 type team at best, which isn't going to do much in the Western Conference, that nobody really noticed. And so I think the conventional narrative on Kevin Durant is lower than it should be. People are looking for, you know, one size fits all explanations for why those teams in Brooklyn and Phoenix fell short of expectations. I think it's largely not about Kevin. I think he's been more durable in his mid to late 30s than people give him credit for. And I think this is the year, just as he's had some bad luck the last few years, I think he chose wisely. He's got a good team around him. And this is going to get Kevin the respect that he still deserves in his late 30s. I think he's an MVP candidate this year.
Ben, if I could drop my mic for you, I would, but it's mounted to my desk. So like, I can't, I'm sorry. I don't have a dummy mic around here anyway. All right. Well, I co-sign all of that. That was very well said. And I do think that we're about to see the narrative shift on Kevin Durant. So I like your bold prediction. Even though it wasn't centered on Aaron Holiday. All right. I'm going to get with mine here. And mine's just, mine's a little bit more low key than y'all's. Maybe I didn't go spicy. I mean, I don't know. We'll see.
It's not bold.
I think it's pretty bold, but I'm clearly bought in a little bit more on Alperen Sengun's playmaking ability than I think you guys are for this season in particular. So my bold prediction is that Alperen Sengun is going to have a 2020 game this season with assists. I think he breaks a 2020. Oh, yeah. I think I mean, you say, oh yeah, and you didn't even give him 7.5 assists a game. So no, you can't suddenly claim that. But I mean, we just saw him in a preseason game in 28 minutes dish out 13 times, and it looked like he did it without breaking a sweat. I think that we are headed for a 2020 game this season for Alperen Sengun, and he's gonna. I mean, I think he's gonna average over 7.5 assists, and I think we're gonna have a 2020 game. That's my bold prediction. I'm fully bought in. I think that the coaching staff is gonna be leaning into Shin Hub quite a bit more this season than we've ever seen before. And I think the recipe for success is right there. And they're going to need to, by necessity, right? The playmaking is there. They've got to tap into it. That's my bold prediction.
One more over-under for you. The Nikola Jokic career high in assists is 22. 22 and a half. Over or under. Will Alperen Sengun break Nikola Jokic's career high for assists in a game?
I'm gonna say under. I'm bullish. I'm bullish on it, but I'm so.
You're not going 23.
Okay, all right. Maybe. Hey, I would love to be wrong though. I would love to be wrong. I love eating crow. It's my favorite meal. All right, so. All right, with that, we want your bold predictions. We want to hear your over-unders for everything we talked about in the episode. Let us know in the YouTube comments. You guys know the drill. Let everybody know where to track you down at. Madison first, Ben after.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at MadmanLeaks. Come talk Rockets basketball and NBA draft.
Yep, Ben DuBose on socials and rocketswire.usatoday.com for all your daily Houston Rockets news coverage.
That's going to do it for another edition of Locked On Rockets. As always, thanks so much for checking out the show. Remember, the best way to help us support the show is to listen every single day on a podcast platform of your choosing, and then like, comment, subscribe on YouTube. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. And we look forward to having you back right here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.